In a previous episode about the Brian Kohberger charges, we took a look at 10 things that just don't seem right about the prosecution following the Idaho 4 murders. We looked at 10 things that just made us scratch our heads. We're still looking at the case and looking at it even closer. We found 5 more things that make us scratch our heads. What are they?
I'm Lainey Law.
And I'm attorney Andrew Myers. The case gets more and more intriguing, I think, as it goes along, doesn't it?
Yeah, I mean, even if you see our last video on 10 things about Kohberger's case that makes us scratch our heads, you look at the comments on that and the world is divided. That video has over 500 comments. Some of us praising us for our work, some of us saying, you don't know anything. And some of us, or some comments even putting out more facts that may or may not be true. Where did people hear this? And let's find some more stuff about this Kohberger case that just don't add up.
Yeah, I agree with you. And as much as I want to jump right in about the comments, there's another YouTuber who knows who she is, who starts out every single episode by saying, be kind, people. We're not perfect. Every now and then we, like all humans, make a mistake. So be kind. Don't personalize. You can call us out and we'll do everything we can to correct it. But we do like your comments. So please don't stop commenting. And by the time we get to the end here, we're actually going to read a couple of your comments. But right now, we need to take a look at some of the things that have happened that just make us say, wait a minute. And in my mind, one of the first things that makes me say, wait a minute, is that the FBI has gone back to 1122 King Road, purportedly to do an interior kind of a visual for the jury. They took a thing called LIDAR. And by the way, other people have pointed this out. And the reason I'm reaching over is to point to my phone. We all have a LIDAR on our advanced iPhones, but the FBI, what we're being told, the public spin is that they had to go in and take a graphic video of the interior of this premises so that they can show the jury. I don't buy it. Do you buy it?
It's weird to be going back to the house. I'm not a law enforcement professional, but you would think that they would have gotten everything and all the evidence that they would have needed initially. So it's strange that they're going back there another time.
Well, I have at least 3 reasons, if not more, why I don't buy it. One of them is that I think that what happened is that the trial was supposed to go in early October of 2023. It didn't go. It got continued. So now they're saying, wait a minute, we got enough evidence to get past the probable cause affidavit, the PCA, as people call it. And we don't know what else they have. Sure, they have more. But my theory is that there's a lot more stuff that they forgot. Maybe they forgot to bang out a couple of pieces of drywall. Maybe they forgot to look under the floor. Maybe they forgot to look inside closets and underneath the floors of the closets. Maybe they forgot to go underneath the floors. That is call me a conspiracy theorist, but I'm guessing that the FBI had to go in there and do some more work, and they took in the LIDAR machines and they told the press that that's what they're doing. Remember, the FBI is the same agency that gave Whitey Bulger a heads up that he was about ready to be nabbed, and Whitey ran. And for 16 years, Whitey Bulger was on the run right under the FBI's noses out in Long Beach, California. Same FBI that whose Boston bureau chief, John Connolly, was sent to jail in Florida for murder. The FBI Boston bureau chief went to jail in Florida for murder. He was recently let out because he's very ill. Same FBI whose leader many years ago used to wiretap without the court's approval various people doing all kinds of horrible things, including President Kennedy having sex and other politicians, and they would hold that against them. So it is the same FBI. Do I trust that that's the reason they went into the house? No. And here's one reason I don't trust that was the reason they went into the house. Here's a newspaper article that goes back to December 4th of 2022. And remember that the crime occurred on November 13th of 2022. This is on the Crime Online site. And in December of 2022, they said law enforcement on Saturday returned to the home where 4 University of Idaho college students were murdered 3 weeks ago as authorities continue the hunt for the killer. Also, Saturday, this piece goes on to say before the investigators were spotted at the scene, the Moscow Police Department said it had received more than 2,600 email tips, upwards of 2,670 calls to the tip line, and nearly 1,100 digital media submissions in the investigation. Okay, all right, good reporting. Stay with me. Authorities collected 113 pieces of physical evidence and took about 4,000 crime scene photos. Police said they had also taken multiple 3-dimensional scans of the residence.
Mhm.
So if they already had scans of the residence, why did they have to go in and do it again?
Mhm.
Nuh-uh. Don't buy it. I'm sorry.
Especially after so much time has passed too, where it's like, what could these 3D scans that they're taking now be different than the ones that were happening closer to the time that this crime was committed?
You know, and the other thing, and another thing, in the law, there's a theory called substantial similarity, and that means that if you have a photograph or a cartoon or a drawing or a likeness or a day in the life or a video or anything like that, it has to be substantially similar to the event that it is portraying. So what that means here is, you know, all that stuff has been stripped out. The police shortly, and a lot of people say way too shortly after the crimes, the police removed all of the personal belongings. They stripped the inside. They took everything out. So the FBI now, you know, more than a year, well, about a year after the crime, after everything has been stripped out of there, you know, for gosh sake, they were going to tear the place down. They were going to tear the place down. So presumably there's nothing inside. So now they go inside with their fancy schmancy LIDAR, which is much more, you know, sophisticated than the LIDAR on my iPhone. And they go in there and they're going to take a video of the interior of 1122 Kings Road. That's not substantially similar to the way it looked at the time of the murders on November 13th. I mean, excuse me, there were college kids living in there. They had their furniture in there. They had their junk. What what college dorm or residence have you ever gone in where everything was perfectly in place? So I don't buy it. I'm sorry. It at the very least, the most naive thing I can say is that it makes me scratch my head. But okay, we'll play along with them and go on to the next thing. Reason number 4 that people can scratch their heads over this is that there was a frat fight. And what evidence do we have? Apparently, there were witnesses to the fact that Ethan Chapin and Xana did go to his Phi Epsilon fraternity the night before all of this happened. And there were words that were spoken. There's a guy by the name of David Loach who apparently had a thing for Xana. He kind of liked her, but Xana's already with Ethan. And there were some words spoken. I guess it didn't go quite as far as our graphic designer made it look like in the picture there, but there were words spoken. There was bad blood. And Xana, you know, politely grabbed her boyfriend Ethan and got him the heck out of there. Well, you know, all right, okay, maybe it's nothing. But the point is, we don't know. By analogy, it's not the same thing, but by analogy, when there was a death in another fraternity, ironically, at Washington State University, right over the border, where accused mass killer Brian Kohberger had been a PhD student. This fellow was found dead in January of 2023. The Washington State University Interfraternity Council, which oversees the fraternal groups at that school, declined to comment to the spokesman review. So, you know what? Fraternities like to cover stuff up and not talk. A spokesman, Phil Weiler, said, quote, "There has been a significant amount of conjecture regarding the circumstances surrounding this incident and the actual cause of the student's passing," KREM TV reported. So the thing that's interesting about that, it's a totally different case. Granted, it's across the border. granted, but it exemplifies the fact that on the one hand, the fraternity didn't want to talk. No, we're not going to say anything. But oh, by the way, there's a lot of speculation out there. So don't tell me that we're not going to tell you what happened in that dormitory the night that Ethan Chapin and the other guy had a fight. We're not going to tell you what happened, but there's a lot of conjecture.
Yeah, well, that is something that a lot of people in the comments had actually brought up, is like the different dramas between the different fraternities. And I'm not entirely sure if it was the same case that you mentioned there, but if not the same case, a similar one where it was supposed to be, oh, it was hazing, and then it's like, oh, it was a deadly combination of alcohol and medication, and then it's just like, oh, it was a self-unaliving, Andrew's favorite term.
Yeah. No, that I think that all those things you just said were
Yeah.
part of. I mean, fraternities have these issues as
Mhm.
time goes on, but yeah, all of those things you just said were part of the issue in the Washington State University
Mhm.
case that we just took a look at. Reason number 3 that we scratch our heads. There has been a lot said and filed in court. In fact, the prosecution and the defense went back and forth over IgG. What is IgG? Well, it's investigative genealogy genes, and it's a science. And it is the way that, for example, one can take the touch DNA off of a knife sheath and then feed it into a system. And then they find that it might be through the system people that have it creates a model. There's a memo out there that goes on for 40 pages. That's not the point of this podcast. Some other podcasters have done a really good and thorough job at that. And in fact, there was a court hearing on this where even the judge was saying, Judge John Judge was saying, I'm getting to the point where I understand this, thank you for briefing it. But none of that matters. None of that matters, because why are they even fighting over the IgG? There are court rulings, and it's a basic constitutional right that the prosecution must turn over all exculpatory evidence. And if they're not turning over the exculpatory evidence, why aren't they turning it over? I mean, is it just the old, well, we don't want to confuse the issues and we don't want to give them probable cause? But in my view, they should never even have been arguing this. The prosecution, the state of Idaho, said, oh, well, none of this was even a part of the probable cause affidavit, and none of it's even relevant, and none of it even, has anything to do with anything. Well, then turn it over. And you know why you should turn it over? The reason why you should turn it over is that the American Bar Association has standards for the processing of DNA evidence. And it goes on and on and on. But I'm going to read you 2 pertinent parts of the criminal justice standards on DNA evidence from the American Bar Association. And it says, Standard 1.2C, the policies and procedures employed for testing DNA evidence should be available for public inspection. E, a person charged with or convicted of a crime should be provided reasonable access to relevant DNA evidence, and if it has been tested, to the test results and their interpretation. So, I mean, if the American Bar Association has spent its time, coming up with these regulations, and Mr. Kohberger is a person charged with a crime, why was this even an argument? I didn't get it. It took a lot of time, and we can dig way deep into what IgG is and the process of going from the touch DNA all the way to Mr. Kohberger from the neighbor's trash in Pennsylvania. I think it's a waste of time. I think the pages and pages and pages of documents were just a waste of time. Am I getting too worked up over this?
I know the whole touch DNA thing like kind of freaks me out. I keep referring back to the comments, but you guys really leave me thinking, and I like see these things and I'm like, oh my goodness, because it might have been 1 or 2 people mentioned. I don't know this, everybody. Shout out to the investigators in the comments, but people are saying that with touch DNA it can be transferred, and that I think that he was like a tutor or something, so people were saying like, oh well, how many papers has he touched, and the whole knife sheet thing having his DNA in the first place, and why, if this person's supposed to be an expert, that there's a knife sheet left over. The whole thing just makes my skin crawl, it just sounds so creepy to think that there could be stuff going on with the DNA, that things could be planted, that things can be changed, that touch DNA can move, can be transferred. The whole thing freaks me out. Ugh.
Yeah, sometime co-host guest Doug Cope, the longtime Boston journalist and journalism professor, made a really pertinent comment the last time we talked about this. And he said, you can go to a yard sale and buy pretty much anything. Now if I don't know, a stupid example, but what if I wanted to take my phone and sell it at a yard sale? Because this is a iPhone 11, and now it's old. It's the 15s are the big thing now. So I take it to a yard sale and sell it, and somebody commits a bad act, and that they buy my phone at a yard sale, and the phone is next to them, and they've just done something really bad. The FBI is going to be knocking on my door. Oh, Mr. Myers, your DNA was found right next to this dead body. And I'm like, okay. So
Yeah,
anyway.
like actually, though, is horrifying.
I know. So now we get to reason number 2 that we still scratch our heads. And that is, in this case, a preliminary hearing had been scheduled in this case. And I'm going to refer to my notes because I want to be accurate. There was a preliminary hearing scheduled in this case. And the purpose of a preliminary hearing in Idaho and many states is to determine if there is probable cause to hold the guy over to, they had probable cause to arrest, but is there enough probable cause to hold him over and deny him of his right to liberty? So the preliminary hearing had been scheduled June 26th. Bada bing, bada boom, May 16th, Mr. Kohberger is indicted. And a lot of people, not just me, scratched their head and said, why not do it out in open? Why not do it in the public preliminary hearing? Why go and revert back to this ancient, archaic system of a indictment by a grand jury? And as was correctly pointed out by one of the TV stations out there, KTVB, grand jury proceedings, including witness testimony, are private and secret. Prosecutors present the information to the grand jury. Possible defendants are not even entitled to be there, and there's no opportunity for anyone to cross-examine witnesses on the defendant's behalf, as there would have been in a preliminary hearing. So these things are done in private, in secret, just like everything else in the Kohberger case. And I'm not the only person that said, with a preliminary hearing that had been scheduled where the defense would have been able to cross-examine the witnesses, why did the prosecution go behind everybody's back and do it secretly and privately behind closed doors in a private indictment?
Mm-hmm. Now, I have a question for you beyond all of this.
Yeah.
I'm getting a little hungry looking at it. Why did we include a sandwich?
Okay, this is law school, constitutional law and evidentiary law 101. First year law school, you learn that based on all the things that I've just said, where there's no right to cross-examine witnesses, where the accused attorneys aren't even allowed to be there, you could indict a ham sandwich. Any law school student will tell you that that's the thing that our professors all tell us, because the ham sandwich didn't even do anything. But if you don't have somebody cross-examining your witnesses, there's a lot of leeway there, and I'll just leave it at that. And so number one, the number one reason why we scratch our heads is, the trial had been scheduled in early October of 2023, and Mr. Kohberger, by and through his attorney, Ann Taylor, waived that. And the question is, did he shoot himself in the foot by waiving his right to a speedy trial? I mean, he could have had the trial. There's a lot of people out there that feel that he has a valid defense. This allowed, as we pointed out back on slide number 1, that the FBI could go back into the house and start looking around and creating this video, whether it's admissible or not. I don't think that's why they went in the house. As I said before, I think that they went in there to take another look. But by delaying the trial, does that give the prosecution another bite at the apple to start going over the investigation and all of the evidence all over again? So I don't know. Again, we don't know any of this stuff, and people are happy to point down in the in the comment section that you don't have evidence to support that. No, but we're human beings with minds, and we're able to use reason and logic and take a look at what we do know, and just say, the right to a speedy trial is in the Constitution. It's in the constitutions of all the states too, and it's there for a reason. So I guess we'll leave it there as a question. And did Mr. Kohberger and his attorney shoot themselves in the foot by waiving their right to a speedy trial?
Now, I guess my question to you with that, and maybe what some people are potentially wondering, is like you mentioned that not doing the right to a speedy trial gives the prosecution time to go look over everything. Do you think that there would be any benefits to waiving that right for them? Is it because you think that they have a good case and that why would they need that extra time?
Well, the thinking was that they too needed more time. They too needed their own experts. With this whole IgG genetic research thing requires experts. I mean, you can't just pull somebody off the street to start talking about the intricacies of looking at DNA and figuring out through family trees whether there were errors in the process. So that's just one area in which the defense will very likely need experts. I mean, they're looking for the death penalty. So when the state is looking for the death penalty, if you're defending, your your LIDAR is going way up. Not that you don't have due diligence with every client in every case every day, but when your client is facing the death penalty, I mean, you've really got to make sure that you are leaving no stone unturned. And I believe that's why most people think that Ian Taylor, the defense attorney, and her two colleagues said, okay, yeah, we'll go ahead and ask for more time because we too need more time to get experts to, really take a hard look at what the prosecution is saying. It's a complicated case. And so, they need to take a deeper look.
Very scary, like you mentioned, like having the death penalty on the line. Like it does make sense to like want to go over things a little bit more. It's the crazy concept just in general for me to even begin to think about.
Yeah, I thought I've actually seen some interesting comments in our comment section. One person that just looked at our previous 10 reasons to scratch your head had said, did they ever get any imprints of tire tracks? And I thought that was interesting because I hadn't thought of that before. I mean, every car is unique. Tires are unique. Even if you and I buy exactly the same tire on the same day, you drive where you drive, I drive the other way that I drive. I might run over a nail, you might run over a piece of glass, whatever. That puts a distinct imprint in those tires. So even though you and I bought the same tire on the same day, you went where you went, I went where I went, and tire tracks from your car and tire tracks from my car, even a week after we buy those two tires, are going to be different. So I just thought it was an interesting thing. We get a lot of interesting comments, don't we?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. It with the comment section and anything you see on YouTube, including podcasters and just anybody on the internet in general. Obviously, anybody's able to say anything that they want to say, but it's really interesting to see like how many details like you guys bring up or know about or question, and just the discussion going around. It looked like a lot of people too were a little bit confused and shocked that Jack S wasn't investigated a little bit more. And you know there's a lot of confusing things. I mean, I agree it's a little weird that this person has gone off to Africa after this case, and like all these different aspects. We're gonna trust the justice system to do the right thing and hope that everything plays out the way that it should. But it is also interesting to see some of the speculation going on in the comments. And even I look at things and you hear things and you watch different podcasts and you learn different things, and it really changes the way you perceive a case, and I appreciate that.
Yeah, that was one of the bigger things, the Jack Showalter angle. And one, people have such divergent opinions. One person, what do you know? What evidence do you have? How do you know? You don't know Jack. No, I don't know Jack. I don't know Jack.
The 54 stabbings was a popular one too. A lot of people said that. A lot of people brought that up, and it was just interesting to see like a lot of the different critiques that people had, and like also how some people too nail into very specific things. I don't know, or 34 rather, not 54.
Yeah, it was 54.
No, 54.
Yeah, it
Okay,
was
yeah.
54. And that came from people saying, well, how do you know she got stabbed 54? I don't know. I've said all along, all we know for sure is what's in the probable cause affidavit. There have been some statements made here and there, but where that came from specifically was from one of my favorite podcasters, Annie Elise. Early on, she said that she had a friend of a friend whose husband, and she knows a lot of people, and she's a very credible storyteller. She really knows how to talk about all these details. She had a friend of a friend whose husband is FBI, and they went in there, and before the gag order, the friend had texted, this is a really gruesome crime scene. Things are pretty messed up. And she read off of her phone the text and that the person had been stabbed 54 times. So that's where it comes from.
Mm-hmm.
Again, is it evidence? We don't know. We're not there yet. But, that was one of many interesting things in the comments. I think the biggest thing, and people have really strong opinions about this, is the 8-hour delay between the time that the crimes are said in the PCA to have been committed, between about 4 o'clock and 4:25, and then the police being called at 11:58 that morning. Pretty much 8 hours. People have really strong feelings one way or the other, and they get really personal about it. It's like, how can you say you don't know? If you're a college student, you sleep late, and that's just no. How could she have slept through the stabbings? It's just the point I'm making. Just the amount of personalization and vociferous, strongly felt feelings is just, and we don't know. We've said on here, what we see, what we read, what we feel, what inferences we draw from what's out there. And we've said all along, we don't know, but let's, we're allowed to discuss it. But anyhow, people have such strong feelings about that 8-hour delay. And I've scratched my head about that and said, I don't know. I really don't. And I think you said, well, college kids sleep late. So we don't necessarily agree, do we?
I don't know. With the 8-hour delay, there was this one comment that had kind of resonated with me to an extent, that was just like, oh well, she was shocked and traumatized, and you can't determine how someone processes their trauma. And like you had mentioned, like, there's kids that have reports of calling 911, and obviously while everybody's different, this is a little off tangent analogy that I have. I in the past have had a different home broken into, and recently I pulled up to my house and I saw a shadow of someone turning off lights in my house. And when I go inside, I ask my partner, like, oh, were you just downstairs? Like, I thought you were downstairs. He's like, no, I wasn't. And my heart stopped, and I made them come downstairs to come look in the house with me, because something felt really awful, because I knew I saw that shadow and it felt very eerie. And it wasn't until a little conversation later, oh, I was just getting a beer. And it's just like, well, you were downstairs. But it's just like, in a situation like that, like, everybody's going to be different. Maybe I'm a little bit more confident and investigative than some people, but it's like, I thought something was wrong. I am panicked, and I am trying to get to the bottom of it immediately. But everybody's different. Everybody's gonna have different reactions. But like comments like that, like the 8-hour delay, like, there's so many different things. But
so let's start a new occasional feature on this show and actually read a couple of the comments with regard to that 8-hour delay. CHMIN dash, I can't even read the person's email, but she said, he or she said, I don't know about you. If I told the cops a whopper like that 8-hour delay excuse, I'd be sitting in jail awaiting trial, most likely as an accomplice. Just telling you what people are saying.
Completely, honestly, accurate.
Do you have one?
So one comment is, what kind of attorney are you if you haven't stayed up at the bar all night up until midday working on a case?
Yeah, well, I guess I'm not the attorney that person thought that I was. I will, before we leave, tell tiny little personal anecdote, and there's probably only a few people that really remember this, but way back many years ago, when I was studying for the bar after getting out of law school. You get out of law school, big whoop-de-doo, you've got to pass the bar. And so there was a message on my answering machine. Remember back in those days when we had answering machines? My answering machine message was, "Sorry, I can't pick up the phone. I'm either studying for the bar or in a bar." So that's the kind of attorney I am, although I stopped that years ago. I'd forget it. Okay, so my closing thought is that, people have really strongly divergent views. And I mean, on the one end, people say, you don't understand, these college kids. She thought it was Ethan leaving. She thought Xana and Ethan had a fight. And so she's a college kid and she may have had a lot to drink. And so she slept until noon. How dare you even question that? Then on the other hand, there are people like the guy whose comment I just read that said, if I made up a crazy story about how I slept for 8 hours after a murder in my house, I'd be in jail. So that's how strongly felt these things are. And we're not going to know until the trial.
Mm-hmm. And like you had mentioned before, it definitely is in the college's best interest to keep these cases as low profile and not, try to kind of protect themselves from any liability and, keep the images up and make sure that things with the fraternities are kind of kept under wraps. I think there's a lot of different elements to it. And, us as podcasters and you guys as commenters, chances are we're not going to have any impact in any legal case whatsoever. Although if you haven't seen our video on the Dairy Rail Trail, be sure to make your opinions heard if you have any opinions about the Dairy Rail Trail, because every time I pass by exit 4, I'm like, a little tiffed off about it. But it is really nice to see the dialogue, and obviously you guys have been subscribing and we really appreciate that, and we're so close to 1,000 subscribers, and we want to say thank you.
Thank you very much. And please don't forget to subscribe, like, and share with your friends and enemies. So thank you very much and have a great week.
Bye-bye.
You have been watching About the Law, a production of the law offices of Andrew D. Myers in Methuen in the Merrimack Valley of Massachusetts and in Derry, just outside of Manchester, New Hampshire. Remember to click the like and subscribe buttons down below. And if you enjoyed this video, be sure to share it with your friends and others. If you'd like to talk to me about an injury case, a car accident, a slip and fall, a serious bodily injury case, or some other case, please feel free to contact me. I'd love to talk to you. You can contact us through my website at attorney-myers.com. We have a contact us block, or you can call on one of the telephone numbers we've given there, or you can email me at andrew@attorney-myers.com. The foregoing is offered for informational purposes only. It is not intended as and does not constitute legal advice. Laws vary widely from state to state. You should rely only on the advice given to you during a personal consultation by a local attorney thoroughly familiar with state laws and the area of practice in which your concern lies. This podcast must be and hereby is labeled advertisement in some jurisdictions.